Good morning to all my friends and family, and welcome to this episode of Jim's 5am Club. As you can see, we've got another Sydney dawn just happening over there in the east, and a beautiful day which no doubt will evolve. I'm sure that this cloud, like it normally does, will blow away and burn off as the sun comes up, and we'll get to experience a new day, a new slate, and a new opportunity to live our life at its fullest. What I'd like to do today is to talk about a seminar that I recently attended, the Tony Robbins UPW Unleash the Power Within seminar that was held at the Kudos Arena at Homebush a couple of weekends ago, and it ran from Thursday to Sunday, so 4 days, but not just 4 normal days. They were 4 spectacular days of knowledge sharing, dancing, going through and learning through exercises, and basically being exposed to the latest and greatest science in the world on health, personal development, wealth creation, and a toolkit basically to help people try and maximize what they can achieve in their lives and help them identify and live their calling or callings. I remember going to the UPW many years ago when I was a young executive working for Telstra, and the sales team back then, headed up by Bill Maywis, all decided to go and do the UPW, and I was intrigued because I could sense a lot of excitement. I could sense a lot of pent-up opportunity that people could see and value. And I asked one of the guys who had been to the previous one. He went to the first UPW that was held in Sydney. The UPW that I went to was the second and third, and it happened around about the early to mid 90s. I forget which year it was, but I didn't go to a wedding. I didn't go to a wedding so that I could go to the UPW weekend. That's how committed and excited I was. And I remember it wasn't all that cheap. You know, when I think back, I remember spending quite a bit of money. It was very expensive in relative terms, but as I say, we learnt a lot during those sessions. And 30 years later, I attended UPW with my eldest daughter Catherine, and we both experienced Tony Robbins and his team at their finest. What I'd done a few years ago is I bought 2 tickets for my daughters, Catherine and Artemis, so that they could attend UPW and try and learn some leadership skills and management skills that they could use in their careers. They've both done very well in their jobs, but sadly these days what I found out, to my amazement, is that a lot of organisations no longer invest in their employees' growth and development and education, and unless you fund it yourself or you do things yourself, you don't get very much support. And my daughters are both working at top tier 1 organisations, US-based organisations. And as I said, I was really surprised, because back in the 80s and 90s, I worked for IBM when IBM was the most respected and revered corporation in the world. And I remember back then, the big thing at IBM was training, education and training, so that they could get the most out of their employees, help them grow and develop, so they could add continuous and significant value to not only their organisation, but also to their clients and to their peers. But as I say, before COVID, back in 2019, I think it was, or 2020, thereabouts, I bought some tickets, and then guess what? COVID hit. But I didn't lose hope. I still thought that Anthony Robbins would come to Australia and do his seminar, but of course we had lockdowns, we had the hysteria, we had everything that occurred for a couple of years here in Sydney, but not only here in Sydney, but throughout the world, that basically put everything on stop, put training on stop, put schools on stop, put people's lives on stop as well. So it was postponed in 2020, then postponed again in 2021, and then in 2022, when I expected it all to go ahead, it didn't go ahead, to my surprise. So there was no seminar in 2023, but to my surprise and my delight, Anthony Robbins scheduled a seminar in 2023. But the fear that we had, or that I had, was that the tickets that I had purchased and paid for may not be honoured. Thank God, Success Resources came to the party and honoured the tickets. But the only catch was, this time round, that my youngest daughter, Artemis, who I'd bought a ticket for, could not attend for the beautiful reason, for a very, very good reason, that she'd given birth to her first child after being through a number of challenges with her pregnancies, 5 miscarriages, and a lot of stop-start and disappointment, I guess is the only way I can say it. But thank God, she listened to her doctor. Her doctor didn't stop giving her hope, even though many of us around her were losing hope. She continued along the path and was able to give birth to a healthy baby girl named Poppy, who is now 4 weeks old. So I attended instead of her, and I went with my daughter Catherine, and I guess we both had the time of our lives. And I was surprised that even after 30 years, the material that Anthony delivers in the Unleash the Power Within weekend, the UPW weekend, is virtually exactly the same as the material that he'd presented 30 years ago, which validates and testifies the fact that it works, the material is relevant, is timeless. And I was surprised that I still remembered the punchlines for the jokes, and still remembered, how the stories went and the examples that were being used. So what I did do during the seminar is I did pay a lot of attention. I have read Anthony Robbins' first 2 books, Unlimited Power and Awaken the Giant Within. And I remember reading Awaken the Giant Within, and not only reading it, but reading it a couple of times and studying it. And if you see the book that I have, it has annotations and underlines as I was reading and taking notes Back in the days when I was investing in myself and reading a book a week when I was a young executive in those heady days, and when I had a young family, because what I wanted to do is I wanted to be the best that I could be, so I could be the best for my partner, for my wife Paula, and also the best father that I could possibly be for my children. So there we go. So what I'd like to do is just try and reflect on the 4 days that I enjoyed at Tony Robbins, given that I'd been to the very, very earliest UPW, and that 30 years have transpired and passed. I've gone from my summer to my winter, and in between was an autumn and a spring. But as we know, and as I can attest to again, once again, the material that Tony Robbins covers is phenomenal. The energy, the feeling that you get, the fact that he bends and stretches you for about 50 hours over 40 days, and you still feel excited, you still feel energized, and you still feel pumped, once again is testament to the value that he brings to people throughout the world. So Tony Robbins kicks off the seminar where he reminds everybody that it's not the end, and life is a cycle, and we're always at the beginning of the next cycle or the end of the previous cycle. And we need to spend time, we need to invest time in our lives to be able to observe and understand patterns, and that learning is simply the art of adding the unknown to the known. And the more you know, the more you're capable of knowing. The more you learn, the more you're capable of learning. And we need to be pattern focused, we need to be comfortable with patterns, and we need to try and observe, understand, and build a library, a repository, an inventory of patterns in our minds, so that we can either use those patterns to make better decisions in future, or use those patterns to be able to identify what's going on and to try and anticipate what's going to transpire once this pattern sees its way. And Tony Robbins is all about trying to understand what makes people do what they do, what makes people tick. And he always asks the question, what is the difference in people? And he says that's why it's important that we study history, we study people, we study autobiographies, we study other people's experiences in terms of books, documentaries, and things like that. Because at the end of the day, nothing much changes in the world. There's no original thought. Whatever you've thought of in your life, somebody else has thought about. Whatever concerns you or is a problem to you has been a problem to somebody else. So we need to study history, we need to study people, we need to study other people's experiences in order to learn from them. And it costs you nothing, because by reading books you can get a lifetime of wisdom captured in 300 pages, which you can read in 10 or so hours and not have to spend your whole life in trial and error, trying to figure it out, trying to recreate and create the wheel when somebody else has already done it. Anthony Robbins also goes on to talk about the importance of decisions, because the decisions we make, the choices that we make in our lives influence and change our trajectory, where we're going to end up. And there are certain patterns that Anthony Robbins talks about that influence who you are and what you do. And he says that it's important in life to spend time contemplating, reflecting and learning. And you can get your money back, he says, but you can't get your time back in your life. So make sure that the time that we have, the limited resource that each and every one of us is gifted by God. And Anthony Robbins says that the one thing that everybody has in common is that we all have the same time. It's what you do with that time that counts the most, and how you can leverage that time is what makes you and turns you who you want to actually be in the long term. Anthony Robbins is a man on a mission, and he has a number of catch cries. And one of the key first learnings that you pick up from his seminar is that you can't progress in life by being passive. We need to invest in ourselves, and we need to do things. We need to experience life, because it's only through doing, it's only through experiencing life that you get to grow and develop. And we need to understand that we all have a different life. We've all had a different past. We're all going to have a different present. I am here, you are somewhere else. You could be in a different time zone or a different season. We're all experiencing a different present, and we're all most certainly going to experience a different future. So what we do is important, and Anthony Robbins says that it's important to invest in yourself so that you can grow, so you can develop, and so you can expand and be of greater value. And he uses the example of when you're in an aeroplane, the first thing that the flight attendants do is they go through the emergency procedures and say that at a time of emergency, an oxygen mask will drop down, and you need to pop that oxygen mask over your face first, and then the face of your children and other people around you who can't do it for themselves. And the reason why we do that is that you can only add value to others if you first add value to yourself. You can only help others by being full. You know, as the saying goes, you know, in times of difficulty, when you are squeezed, what comes out of you is what you've got inside you. When you squeeze an orange, you get orange juice. When you squeeze a lemon, you get lemon juice. And similarly, when you squeeze a person, you get love, or you get hate, or you get indifference. You know, that's why we need to be full. We need our cup to be overrunning so that we can be generous with our skills and with our capabilities. I remember years ago going to the ballet at the Opera House over there, and Stephen Heathcote was the principal dancer. He was a tall ballet dancer, very, very athletic, very strong and very graceful. And I remember sitting next to a lady, and we have tickets, and I still have tickets to the ballet where we go 4 times a year with my wife. It's our date night, and I enjoy the peace and quiet and the tranquility of the ballet. But I remember her turning to us at the end of the ballet, and she said, "Oh, Stephen Heathcote, He's so generous. He makes all the other dancers around him look so good. And I sat and reflected on it, and I said that because Stephen Heathcote is so good, he has not only the time to express himself and do the best that he can possibly do, but he can also have extra time so that he can help the others around him pull off their pirouettes and their moves, and to be in the right place at the right time and have the right amount of strength to be able to leverage his talents to help others achieve their talents as well. Another powerful lesson that we got from this seminar with Anthony Robbins is that we are all in different seasons, different phases, and different chapters of our lives. So not only are we experiencing a different past, a different present, and a different future, at every moment in our lives, people are at different places on their growth cycle and their growth phase or growth plane. Some people are experiencing a winter, others are experiencing a summer. And Anthony Robbins says, and I love this quote, I love it so much. He says, we need to meet everyone where they are, and not to expect everybody to be in the same season as what we are, but to meet people where they are, because we're all experiencing different seasons, different chapters, and different phases in our lives, and we need to be attuned to that, and to know that even though we're happy, somebody else could be sad, or vice versa. We need to be able to learn to work with it, to leverage it, to see it, to ensure that our emotional intelligence is attuned to how other people are, so that we meet people where they are, and we can work with people based on the season, the phase, the chapter in their life that they're experiencing. The other thing that Anthony Robbins also mentions is that we live in a world now which has tremendous immediate media coverage, and we have lots and lots of communication, and hence we also have lots and lots of triggers which create PTSD. He did mention that the word trigger is a little bit overused, but each and every one of us have things that annoy us, people that annoy us, circumstances that annoy us. And what he says is that we need to be able to understand what makes us tick, what makes other people tick around us, and to try and get rid of all the things that trigger us, and understand the triggers that other people are dealing with, and to manage those things as best we can. And to also know, and this is a great point as well, that bad times happen in the world, and it happen to everybody. They've always happened. There've been good times, bad times, and indifferent times. But we need to be able to see bad times in terms of what they really are. And he says that bad times serve us. They are a gift from God, and life happens for us. We are all different from each other. We need to understand that we're all different, and we're all going to have a different life. But we are different from each other, and here's a brilliant point as well. But the reason why we're different from each other is we're different for each other. The differences that God gives us are there so that we can supplement and complement each other's strengths and weaknesses. God could have made the whole world exactly the same. He could have made it monotone. He could have made every single tree the same shape. He could have made every building the same, exactly the same. But How would it be if everything was exactly the same? The world would be a monochrome and a very boring place, and we wouldn't have things like the Opera House. We wouldn't have monuments like the Harbour Bridge. We wouldn't have the variability, the variety, the uncertainty in the world that makes it interesting, makes it exciting, makes it unique, and makes it ours. So we need to understand that whatever happens in life, the old cliche is that it happens for a purpose. But what Anthony Robbins says, whatever happens to us in life happens for you. It's up to us to find empowering interpretation of what is happening so that we can allow it to serve us rather than to destroy us or disappoint us or disempower us. It's up to us, it's up to our interpretation. The way we see the world is more important than what happens, because it happens to serve us. We can surf it, we can learn to surf it and to use it to take us to where we want to go. Anthony Robbins also mentions that what we give is what we have. So the key message is that we need to invest in ourselves. We need to invest in our capabilities so that we can become better day by day. We need to grow and develop. There's no doubt about that. And we need to be selfish to a certain extent. I remember going to Anthony Robbins UPW years ago, and I was a little bit conflicted by the thought that we need to be selfish. But when I sit back and think about it now that 30 years have passed, he makes a valid point. In order to grow and develop and to add value, you first need to be selfish. You first need to invest in yourself. You need to develop yourself. You need to build yourself in order to then take that network, take that money, take that knowledge and use it to help others who are in need. You can't help somebody if you don't have something to help them with. And that's why God gives us money. That's why God gives us health. That's why God gives us education. That's why God gives us technology. So we can take all those things and use them so that we can serve God with all our heart, mind and soul, and serve one another and love one another as we love ourselves. Once again, the key message there is that to help and to love others, you first need to love yourself. You need to discover the love for yourself before you can help and love others. That is really, really powerful. So something to think about. And the other thing that Anthony talks about early in his seminars is that disappointment is a part of life. What I love about Anthony Robbins is that he's direct and he doesn't mince his words. He makes things and he puts things into clear perspective. And he reminds us all that disappointment is a part of life. It will either drive you or destroy you. It's up to you to try and figure out how you're going to use the challenges, the problems, the pain that you experience in your life. It's up to you, it's up to me to make the most of all the things that happen in my day, in my life, in my family. And as Anthony Robbins says, it can either drive you or it can destroy you. But it's up to you to determine how you're going to fare and how you're going to work the things that happen in our life. Anthony also reminds us not to fight the seasons, but to use them. And a very, very powerful message, something that really resonated with me, is where Anthony Robbins says, if you can survive winter, everything else, everything else in your life that comes after winter is easy, and you'll be able to survive it really, really easily. And to know that springtime always follows winter. The calm always follows the storm. And to know that life happens, as we said, in cycles. There are patterns that we need to understand and to appreciate. And the one constant that we have in our life is that everything ends and everything has a new beginning. Nothing is permanent. The only permanent, the only constant thing in life is God. And for us to be one with God. So we need to embrace and welcome the winters in our lives and accept it, and not to fight against the winter, and to work with winter. And the other key point that Anthony makes along these lines is that we need to master, to be the master of the meaning that we have and that we figure out in life. And life meaning is emotion, and emotion is my life. And to know that we take action that is propelled by our emotion. And emotion is a physical thing, but it's also an emotional thing. That's why it's called emotion. It's the drive that you get from your energy and from your emotions. And one of the key messages from Anthony Robbins and UPW is that we need to learn to manage our emotions. And if we can manage our emotions, if we can manage how we feel, that it will change our lives. Anthony goes on to talk about the fact that 60% of what we do is habit. We do it on autopilot. We don't have to think about it. And we get locked into patterns, the same patterns, and we just react to things automatically without even having to physically, mentally think about it. Of course, the thinking and the programming has happened at the subconscious level, but we get locked into patterns, and sometimes these patterns serve us and are good for us, and other times these patterns may be dysfunctional and not serve us. So what we need to do is we need to look at these patterns and to be honest, brutally honest with ourselves, and ask ourselves if these patterns are serving us, and to see if they're empowering or disempowering. And the other thing that Anthony Robbins says is that 40% of people get better with drugs and therapy, but 60% of people have no change whatsoever. So we need to look at ways of instituting change in our lives, bringing improvement to our lives, and sorting ourselves out. And it happens through, as Anthony Robbins says, the rewiring of our brains, where we look at the patterns that don't serve us and we scramble them and we replace them with a better pattern. And we can either go through and do it by trial and error, or we can do it in a constructive, in a methodical, in a structured way, by taking and modeling other people's example. Because as we said before, there are people around us who are achieving, who are living the life that we'd want to live. From a Christian perspective, they are known as saints. And there are people who have been great examples for all people who have been through tremendous pain and got through it. There are heroes all around us, in our families, in our society, that we can tap into at any time. The next key point that Anthony Robbins makes is that movement is critical to our biochemistry, because movement changes our biochemistry. The science of movement is one of the key messages that come from Anthony Robbins, and he covers it in his book, Awaken the Giant Within, where he says that your movement can dramatically change the way you see things, the way you feel things, and the way you interpret things. So we need to be masters, we need to be detectives of movement, and make sure that we use movement to our advantage. Anthony Robbins gives the example of sports people that he works with, and he uses Tom Brady as an example, where he says that Tom Brady, who plays gridiron, and he says that towards the end of the game, when everybody else is tired and everybody else is giving up, is where Tom Brady comes into his own, and he gets a surge of testosterone where it goes through the roof towards the end of the game, where he's able to pull off and deliver a miraculous sort of movement or pass, where his body is so clear, his mind is so clear, that he can execute things that most other players can't do it. And the reason why he can do that is that, you know, on the one hand, he's wired that way. The other thing is that he's got a belief system that suggests that energy comes from energy. So the more you use, the more you can fuel yourself. And just knowing what makes him tick and how he works is something which is phenomenal, and he talked about it with great passion. Anthony Robbins also goes on to say that most people think that things are worse than what they really are, and this is caused by fear. And most people's fears, they vary, but most people have a fear of failure, a fear of being unloved, and Anthony will go through and talk about those fears, and we'll touch on those in the next episode. But most people seem to think that things are much worse than what they are. They are pessimistic in their outlook, and also there are people who seem to think that other people are much bigger, better, stronger and more wonderful than what they are. So it's like playing golf, you know, when you miss a shot and the other person sinks the putt. You know, there's a big difference that is caused by the way you see yourself in a negative way, and how you see other people in a positive way makes the gap even more pronounced, I guess is what I'm trying to say. So just finishing off this first video, Anthony Robbins says that we need to get in tune with ourselves and to be childlike, because kids know how to influence their chemistry through movement and voice. Just go to a school during lunchtime or playtime there, and you'll just hear kids shouting and moving and running and chasing each other. It just doesn't stop. I see my granddaughter Elizabeth, when she comes back from her play school or preschool, whatever it's called, now she's still sweating even after she comes home, because she's been running around and just having the time of her life throughout the day, running, jumping, shouting, fighting, doing all of those things that kids do but it's something that makes them feel alive. And the last point that Anthony talks about is that we need to be a self-directed and a fast learner in order to survive this new world. I myself, I'm 63 now. I've worked as a corporate accountant for 35, 40 years of my life. And my job has been made redundant 5 times in my lifetime, and I've had to reinvent myself. I have had to change and try and do and survive. And I'm saying, well, if I've had to go through 5 redundancies and I've worked for some of the biggest and best corporations in the world, then what do other people expect in their lifetimes, where the world through technology is changing at a dramatic pace? We've got artificial intelligence happening at the rate of knots. We're going to blink and the technology of AI is going to do things that we never ever thought were possible. So the call to action from Tony Robbins is to understand that we need to be self-directed and very, very quick learners, and not to sit back and rest on our laurels, but to continue to grow and develop and to lean outside our comfort zone, because that is where the wow is, that is where the future is, that is where security and certainty is, knowing that the only thing certain is constant and never-ending change. And we need to continue to grow and change, because to maintain a status quo, we need to understand that today's 8 out of 10 is tomorrow's 6 out of 10. So we need to keep on pushing and pumping forward in order to just maintain where we currently are. So not to fight it, but to embrace it, to grab it with your 2 hands, your 10 fingers, your 2 arms, and squeeze it tight to your body, and to never ever let it go. To be a life learner, to wake up knowing that you're going to learn, you're going to experience, you're going to push yourself to do things that you never thought were comfortable. But the more you do it, the better you get at it. And I guess I'll leave it there. So we'll just go through and do a few more videos. So stay tuned, stay with me, and because my principle, my driving mission in life is to live, learn and pass it on. My YouTube channel, Jim's 5am Club, has over 1,600 videos where I've done book summaries, I've done life experiences, where I take things and turn them into seminar type presentations. I'm unscripted. I don't go through and edit what I do. I just talk from the heart, off the cuff, and just try and be partners in each other's growth and development, so that we can better understand what is going on in our lives, and to try and use some of the OPE that we are gifted from other people. Take care, have a good rest of the day, and we'll chat again soon. Bye for now.